I don't know exactly why I'm doing this. My granddaughter set up this camera 3 weeks ago. She said, "Grandpa, just talk. Just say whatever you want to say." And then she left for work, and I sat here for 3 weeks not saying anything. Today felt different. I'm not sure why. My name is Walter Marsh. I'm 86 years old. I live in the same house I've lived in for 49 years, in a town that has slowly stopped recognizing me back. Which is fine. I've stopped recognizing a few things myself. I want to talk about something that I don't have a clean word for. It's not regret, exactly. It's more like you look in the mirror one morning and you see someone standing there who made all the same choices you made, lived all the same days you lived. And yet, somehow, the person looking back at you is not quite who you thought you were becoming. That's what I want to talk about. Not because I think it'll help anyone, I'm past thinking things like that, but because I'm 86, and there's a particular kind of silence that builds up over a life, and it gets heavy, and I suppose I just want to put it somewhere before I can't anymore. I grew up in a small house outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. My father was a quiet man, not cold, just economical with himself. He didn't waste words, didn't waste emotion. He worked, he came home, he sat in his chair. And I remember thinking as a boy that I would be different, that I would be warmer, more present. I had all these feelings as a boy that I was certain I would carry into my life as a man. I don't know when I put them down. That's the part I can't locate. There wasn't a morning I woke up and decided to become closed. There wasn't a moment I chose distance over closeness. It just accumulated, like how a house gets dusty. You don't see it happening, and then one day the light comes through the window at a certain angle, and you see it everywhere. I married Evelyn in 1968. She was 24, I was 28. She had this way of walking into a room like she was curious about it, like even a room she'd been in 100 times might have something new to offer her. I loved that about her. In the beginning, I loved almost everything about her. We had 2 children, a son, Daniel, and a daughter, Claire. Daniel came first in 1970, Claire in 1973, and those early years I remember them as full of noise and need and exhaustion, and something underneath all of it that I can only describe as aliveness. I was present then, I think, in the way that young fathers are present, physically there, caught up in the machinery of raising small people, baths and dinners and weekend drives. I did all of it. I showed up for all of it. But showing up and being there are 2 different things, and it took me most of my life to understand that those are not the same sentence. I worked in insurance, liability, and commercial accounts. It was not a passionate career. I want to be honest about that. I didn't love it, but I was good at it, and being good at something has a way of becoming its own kind of identity if you let it go on long enough. And I let it go on for 38 years. There's a version of me from 1979, I was 39 then, who I think about sometimes. We had just moved into this house. Daniel was 9, Claire was 6. Evelyn had just started teaching part-time at the elementary school, which made her happy in a way I noticed but didn't remark upon enough. I remember one Saturday that fall. I was sitting at the kitchen table going over some files I'd brought home from the office. Daniel came in and asked me to come outside and throw the ball with him, and I said, "In a little while," and then I said it again an hour later, and then it was dark. That's not a dramatic story. Nothing terrible happened. Daniel went outside by himself and came back in for dinner, and we all sat down together, and I probably asked him about school. Life continued completely normally. But I've thought about that Saturday more times than I can count. Not because of what happened, because of the version of me that existed in that moment, who genuinely believed the files were more important,
who had already, without knowing it, begun to organize his life in a way where the things that mattered most were always scheduled for later. Later became a very long time. Evelyn used to say that I was elsewhere. That was her word for it. Not angry, not distant, just elsewhere, like a part of me had taken up residence in some other room and only sent back a representative. I didn't like hearing that. I want to be honest about that too. When she said it, I felt defensive. I felt like she wasn't accounting for all the things I was carrying, the work, the pressure, the bills, the responsibility of keeping a family fed and housed and moving forward. And I wasn't wrong about those things. I was carrying them. But I used them the way you use an umbrella, not just to stay dry, but to keep a certain amount of the world from touching you. I don't know when I started doing that. I don't know if there was a reason, or if it was just what I learned from watching my father, who learned it from watching his. Some things get passed down without anyone meaning to pass them. There was an evening, Daniel must have been 16, when he came home from school and went straight to his room and didn't come down for dinner. Evelyn went up to check on him. I stayed at the table. I told myself I was giving him space, that teenage boys needed space, that I was respecting something. Evelyn came back down after about 20 minutes. She sat across from me, and she looked at me in a way she had sometimes, like she was deciding whether to say something. She said, "He could use you tonight, Walter." And I said, "He knows where I am." I meant it kindly. I meant it as a kind of reassurance. He knows I'm here. The door's open. He can come to me. But that's not how it works, is it? You can't just leave a door open and call that fathering. Some doors you have to walk through yourself. I didn't go upstairs that night. I don't remember why. I think there was a game on. I think I told myself I'd check on him later. Daniel is 54 now. He lives in Oregon with his wife and their 2 kids. We talk on the phone every few weeks. The conversations are pleasant. They're always pleasant, and they're always about 12 minutes long. I'm not telling you he hates me. He doesn't. I don't think he does. But there's a particular kind of closeness that you either build when someone is young and still building themselves, or you don't build it. And we didn't build it. And now we're 2 people who love each other from a respectable, comfortable, unbreachable distance. And I know whose choices created that distance. That's the thing about becoming someone slowly. You don't feel it. You feel like yourself every single day. You feel like Walter, responsible Walter, steady Walter, reliable Walter. And all those things were true. I was all of those things. But somewhere in the accumulation of being those things, I stopped being some other things, warmer things, more inconvenient things, things that required me to be uncomfortable or uncertain or openly in need of someone else. And by the time I started to see it clearly, my children were grown, and Evelyn was... I'll get to Evelyn.
I want to talk about Evelyn for a moment, though I'm not sure I know how. We were married for 44 years. She died in 2012. Pancreatic cancer. It moved quickly, which the doctors said was in some ways a mercy, and I understood what they meant intellectually, but there was nothing merciful about the speed of it from where I was standing. We had 8 months from diagnosis to the end, and I want to tell you something about those 8 months that I have never said out loud to another person. Those 8 months were, in certain ways I am deeply ashamed of, some of the most present I had ever been in my marriage. I was there. I was fully, completely, undeniably there. I held her hand. I sat with her through the bad nights. I talked to her, really talked, the way we had in the very beginning, before I got so good at being elsewhere. I told her things. She told me things. We had conversations in that small, difficult window of time that we had never managed to have in 44 years of living in the same house. And she said to me one evening, maybe 6 weeks before the end, she was tired, she was on the medication that made her a little slow, but also somehow clearer. She said,
"I've been waiting for you to come back." I said, "I've been here, Evelyn." She looked at me. She didn't say anything for a while, and then she said, "I know. That's what I mean." I've turned that over in my mind almost every day for 13 years. I think I know what she meant. I think she meant that she could see me, the version of me from before, the one she married, the one who used to be curious and warm and willing to be uncertain. She could see him in there during those 8 months, and she had been waiting for him to come back for a very long time. And he came back too late to do anything but sit with her while she left. I'm not going to tell you how that feels. I don't think I have the words, and I'm not sure words would be the right container for it anyway. But I will say this. There is a particular kind of loneliness in being fully present for the first time at the moment when presence can no longer change anything, when it's no longer a gift you're giving, when it's just a man sitting in a chair next to a bed, understanding things too late to do anything with the understanding. After Evelyn passed, I lived alone in this house for a while, without really noticing that I was living. Claire came to stay for 2 weeks. She's always been softer, is the word, I think, more willing to reach across whatever distance exists between people. She would make dinner, and we would sit at this table, and she would try to talk to me, and I would answer, and we would both know the answers weren't quite landing where the questions were aimed. At one point she said, "Dad, do you want to talk about Mom?" And I said, "Not particularly." I don't say that to make myself sound cold. I said it because I didn't know how to talk about Evelyn without getting somewhere inside myself that I had spent a very long time not going. And at 72, you don't suddenly know how to do things you've spent 40 years avoiding. Claire went back home to her life in Maryland. We talk every Sunday. Her conversations run a little longer than Daniel's, maybe 20 minutes. She's warmer. She tries harder. I think she got that from Evelyn. I want to be careful here because I don't want to turn this into a story about how I was a bad husband or a bad father. I don't think that's exactly true, and I don't think simple stories are ever exactly true. I provided, I was faithful, I was never cruel. I was at every graduation, every Christmas morning, every hospital waiting room that needed me. By a lot of measurements, I was a good man. But there's a measurement I didn't know to apply until it was too late. And it has to do with whether the people in your life feel like they actually reached you, whether they feel like they got through. Daniel, when he was maybe 12 or 13, went through a phase where he would come and stand in the doorway of whatever room I was in. He wouldn't say anything, he'd just stand there, and I would look up and ask if he needed something, and he'd say no, and eventually he'd leave. I thought he was being strange. Teenagers are strange. I let it go on for months without asking a better question than, "Do you need something?" What he needed was for me to say, "Come in," to put down what I was doing and say, "Come in and sit down and just be here for a minute." He needed me to want his company without a reason. I don't know if children know what they need in those moments. I don't think Daniel knew, but I think some part of him kept coming to stand in doorways, hoping I would figure it out. I didn't figure it out. He eventually stopped standing in doorways.
There's a photograph on the bookshelf behind me. You might be able to see it. It's from 1985. We were on vacation at the Delaware shore. I'm standing with Evelyn and the kids on the beach. I'm smiling. We're all smiling. I look at that photograph sometimes, and I try to remember what was inside that smile, whether I was happy or whether I was just doing what you do in photographs. I think I was happy, in the way I understood happiness then, which was mostly about things being calm, things being in order, no one sick, no one fighting, the bills paid, the sun out. I think that was my definition of happiness for a very long time, a kind of absence of difficulty. And Evelyn's happiness was something different. I could see it sometimes when she didn't know I was watching, when she was in the garden,
or when she was on the phone with her sister, or when Daniel said something that made her laugh in a certain way. There was something alive in her face in those moments that I don't think she ever had when she was looking at me. I don't say that to be dramatic. I say it because I think she needed someone who would meet her there, in that alive place. And I kept showing up as the steady, responsible, elsewhere Walter, and she kept finding her aliveness in other rooms. We were a good marriage in the structural sense. We were not a great love, or not as great as it could have been. And I think she knew that, and I think I knew that. And we never said it, because what would you do with it? You just keep living, which is what we did. I'm 86 now. My knees are unreliable. I have a heart condition that my doctor describes as stable but worth watching, which I've decided to take as a personal motto. I sleep poorly. I wake up between 2 and 4 in the morning and lie there in the dark with the whole long quiet of the house around me. Those hours are where most of this thinking happens. I think about Daniel standing in doorways. I think about Evelyn saying she'd been waiting for me to come back. I think about all the Saturday afternoons that became evenings that became something neither of us mentioned. I think about who I was trying to be, because I think that's the thing. I wasn't trying to be cold. I wasn't trying to be absent. I was trying to be responsible, I suppose, sturdy. I wanted to be the kind of man that people could count on not to fall apart. And somewhere in the pursuit of that, I built walls I thought were just good posture. I thought I was holding things together. I didn't know I was holding people out. My granddaughter, Emma, Claire's youngest, she comes by on Thursdays. She's 24. She reminds me of Evelyn in the way she walks into rooms, that curiosity, that sense that the room might have something new to offer her. She talks to me like I'm still fully here, which I appreciate more than I know how to say. A few months ago, she asked me if I had any regrets, just like that, over soup. The directness of young people is something I have come to find genuinely moving. I sat with the question for a while. I said, I think I regret waiting to understand things until after they mattered. She looked at me. She said, "What things?" And I couldn't explain it in a way that would have meant anything to someone 24 years old with their whole long life still running out in front of them. The understanding lives in the specific weight of the years. You can't transfer it. It just sits with you. I said the usual things, and we went back to our soup. But the question stayed with me, and I think it's part of why I'm sitting here talking to this camera today. I don't know what I want from this. I said that at the beginning, and it's still true. I'm not trying to pass something along. I'm not trying to teach. I've watched enough of these videos. Emma shows me things sometimes, and I know there's usually a shape to them, a turning point, a lesson, a moment where everything clarifies, and the person looks at the camera and tells you what it all means. I don't have that. What I have is a long life that I lived mostly in good faith, making choices that seemed reasonable from inside them, and a growing suspicion in these last years that the most important things were happening slightly to the left of where I was looking. And I can't go back. That's the part that sits with me at 2 in the morning. Not guilt exactly, more like a permanent quiet awareness of the distance between what was possible and what was. Evelyn is gone. Daniel is in Oregon with his 12-minute phone calls and his own life that I'm peripheral to. Claire tries, and I love her for it, and I know I am not always easy to reach even now. And I'm 86 years old, sitting in a house I've lived in for 49 years, talking to a camera because my granddaughter thought it would be good for me. Maybe it is. I've been sitting here long enough that the light through the window has changed. That happens in the afternoon this time of year. It comes in low and yellow, and it makes the room look like an old photograph. I used to not notice that. I notice it now. I notice a lot of things now that I move through too quickly for too long. The way the house sounds in the morning, the weight of a cup of coffee when you're sitting still, the particular feeling of an ordinary day when you understand that ordinary days are most of what a life is made of, and that you spent a great many of them waiting for something more important to begin. Nothing more important ever began. This was it. This ordinary, quiet, passing, unremarkable life was the one I had, and it had Evelyn in it, and Daniel in doorways, and Claire who calls on Sundays, and Emma with her soup questions and her grandmother's walk. It had enough in it to have been more than I made it. That's what I keep coming back to. Not that it was a bad life, not that I was a bad man, just that there was more available than I collected, more warmth I could have given, more doors I could have walked through myself instead of waiting beside. And the person who didn't do those things was me, not a version of me, not the busy me, or the stressed me, or the responsible me, just me, Walter Marsh, 86 years old, who became, slowly and without noticing, someone a little harder and a little further away than he ever meant to be. I think that's what I wanted to say. I'm not sure it adds up to anything. It might just be an old man talking to a camera on a Thursday afternoon because the silence got heavy enough to need somewhere to go. But if you watched this and something in it sat with you, maybe just let it sit. Don't rush past it. I spent a lot of years rushing past things, and I'm here to tell you the things don't go anywhere. They just wait. And eventually you have enough years behind you to finally stop and turn around and see them all standing there, waiting to be understood. That's all.